If you love comic books but can't stand the unnecessary bother of turning pages, Fire and Ice may be for you. It would help if you were a sex-obsessed 12-year-old boy, but it isn't essential. These are the infamous words used to describe cult classic animation film Fire and Ice. I started this video essay with that quote because I don't think there has ever been a more accurate way to describe a film in the history of cinema. Hi everyone, my name is Caleb Jansons, and in this video essay we'll be breaking down the production, reception, animation and story of Fire and Ice, the forgotten adventure film by Ralph Bakshi. By the year 1982, fantasy films had proven that they could be a success at the box office. After the likes of Beastmaster and Conan the Barbarian captured the hearts of millions of moviegoers, animation legend Ralph Bakshi, the director behind Fritz the Cat and The Lord of the Rings, realized the potential of an animated adult fantasy film. Ralph Bakshi was inspired by the influential fantasy artist and friend Frank Frazetta and approached him about the creation of Fire and Ice. Frank Frazetta was a renowned artist whose illustrations laid down the template for fantasy art to this day. The two then began working together to create the danger and adventure-filled world in which the film would take place. Bakshi received $1.2 million to finance Fire and Ice, and 20th Century Fox agreed to distribute the film after witnessing the financial longevity of another Ralph Bakshi project, Wizards. As Fire and Ice was the most action-oriented film Bakshi had worked on till that point, he once again took advantage of rotoscoping. Rotoscoping is a technique in which the movie is first filmed in live action before being drawn over and animated. This process allowed for a heightened sense of realism in the look, feel, and movements of the characters on screen. And the live action footage that is shot in a studio is easily placed into a fantastical setting. While rotoscoping is an incredibly clever technique, it is not necessarily a quick or easy one, and many individuals worked tirelessly to bring the scenes to life. Bakshi and Frazetta were heavily involved in the production of the live action sequences, from casting sessions all the way to the final shoot. The film was released to mixed reviews at best, and the reception could be described as lukewarm or tepid, with many comparing the movie to the He-Man series and Conan the Barbarian, usually stating that while the animation was pretty enough, the script left an awful lot to be desired, and the scantily clad protagonist simply proved the film's lack of substance. However, in 1993, the Online Films Critics Society ranked the film as the 99th greatest animated film of all time. With the film's history done and dusted, let's explore the world of Fire and Ice and its story. After about 2.5 minutes, we are introduced to the world by the narrator and are told that the film takes place during the last great ice age. We learn about a powerful and evil queen by the name of Juliana, whose goal is to extend her kingdom to all regions of the known world. She bore a son named Necron, who was trained in the dark arts and would eventually become the antagonist of the film. Together the two created a glacier that would rumble south and destroy all who stood in their way. And that's how the movie starts. Honestly, like most Bakshi films, the narration is captivating and sets up the world beautifully. This was also done incredibly well in the aforementioned Lord of the Rings and Wizards. But back to the film. Necron continues to push the glacier southward until it enters the territory of the Fire Kingdom. As the glacier progresses, it crushes the village of our main character Larn. Larn and his brethren stand no chance against the glacier. Necron's forces then arrive to finish off the remnants of the village as a shadowy figure watches them from above. Juliana then sends in a group of minions to Fire Keep with a list of demands for their surrender. Larn awakens from his injuries and has to fight his way to freedom. It is during this initial confrontation that we get to see the beauty of rotoscoping in action. The live-action realism shines through as the characters launch themselves at one another and interact with the environment. Everything feels real and has weight to it. An intense chase ensues as Larn makes his way up through the lush vegetation, ultimately resulting with him being cornered and his only means of escape being a massive drop into a gorge. Ultimately, I believe this was an incredibly well thought out introduction to the film. We are introduced to our lead character and the evil minions that he'll be facing throughout the film. We are shown how the film and in turn the fights will be set up stylistically. And so ultimately, after this sequence, you will know if this is a film you're going to enjoy or not. We then move on to Firekeep. Here we are introduced to the Fire King and his daughter, Princess Teegra. And this is the most clothes you will see her wear in the entire movie. Necron's minions offer the deal of surrender, to which the Fire King refuses, sparking off the major conflict in this film. Because of this refusal, Princess Teegra is kidnapped, and the slowest scene in history takes place. I have no idea why the scene was placed in slow motion. It completely contradicts the emotion one would be feeling during a kidnapping. If I were being kidnapped, my adrenaline would be running all over the place and my mind would be running at 200% capacity. Please tell me what looks more convincing. This? Or this? So Necron's forces take off with Teegra after a successful kidnapping, but very quickly, almost unrealistically quickly, grow thirsty and stop off at a lake to drink some water. The evil minions throw Teegra into the lake, and a very unsettling sequence takes place where Teegra is ultimately objectified, but she uses this to her advantage and makes an attempt to escape while swimming underwater. She is able to hide inside a log while Necron's forces begin looking for her. And so begins my favorite scene in the entire movie. This scene is simply fantastic in my opinion. A combination of beautiful animation, an intense setting, and great sound design result in a scene very similar to what we witness in an earlier Bakshi scene from The Lord of the Rings. The tension continues to rise, and just when you think Teegra is about to be caught, Necron's forces then retreat as Teegra leaves her hiding spot and continues to try escaping the minions, who are becoming frustrated and desperate. On the verge of being found again, the forces are attacked by a giant reptile. This was accomplished by using trucks and cranes while filming the live action sequence and simply replacing them with monsters while animating. One surviving minion of the attack is able to track down the princess, and even in his near-death state is trying to capture her. Armed with only a pointed stick, Princess Teegra thrusts it into his chest to defend herself. And here we start to see a small amount of character development take place, from sheltered princess to a woman willing to fight to survive. We catch up with Larn, who has been walking across fields, jungles, and has now found himself in a swamp where he has been approached by 4 hungry wolves. He takes out the first quite easily, and after the longest, highest scream I have ever heard from a man, cleverly vaults himself over the wolves in an attempt to run away. Just as the first wolf is about to catch him, an arrow is shot into its side by a mysterious shooter, and the final 2 simply walk away. Larn then walks into some ruins, and we get the weirdest cut I have seen in a very long time. I have no idea what that was. Maybe an eye, but that's all we see and it's never explained. It just happens. Night falls as Lars eats a freshly killed boar. Something approaches him, slowly. Of course it's Princess Teegra, and the two have a weird confrontation as she slowly retreats and he follows after her. I guess they're flirting. I mean, I don't know how cave people flirt, so I guess they are flirting. And with only one conversation spoken between the two of them, they are now cuddling and enjoying a meal. I bet their relationship is going to be full of intellectual conversations. Their relationship is, well, not really fleshed out to say the least. They barely communicate with one another, and when they do, their interactions are incredibly short and shallow. After some hijinks, the two end up in a lake and are attacked by a giant monster. After some beautiful underwater animation, we see the eye of the monster. Wait, is that? I have no idea why this clip appears earlier. I tried to do some research on the topic of this random eye, and I wanted to see if it was just a copy of the film that I had where this appears. But I couldn't find anything. I am not aware if the eye was an error or intentional, but it is visible on all editions of the film that I could find. So there's some random potential trivia for you, I guess. After his confrontation with the giant octopus, Larn is thrown through the air and onto the shore with a sickening thud, and lays there motionless, alone. Once again, Teegra is captured by the evil minions and taken away. Now Teegra was just crying over this dude, and they have been set up to be the love interests of the movie. But so far they've only shared around 3.5 minutes on screen together. So yeah, their relationship isn't one of the strengths of this movie. Larn then awakens, finds himself tied down, and he comes face to face with a mysterious stranger who has been following him throughout the whole movie. This stranger shares a striking similarity to the bust we see in the ruined city, but no connection is ever mentioned on screen. And the character is not given much of a backstory. According to the credits at the end of the film, his name is Darkwolf. The two search for Teegra only to discover that she has been kidnapped. Teegra has now been tied up with a chain and is belittled by her captors as they laugh at her. As night falls, they become drunk and fall asleep. She grabs a knife and attempts to cut her chains before waking the guard. As he awakens, she quickly thrusts the knife into his torso and drags his lively body away before falling down a ravine. Larn and Darkwolf arrive at the minions' camp and split up to find Teegra. The thick mist makes it easy for the duo to creep closer, and it creates an incredibly creepy aesthetic. The minions awake and attack Darkwolf and Larn, who easily defeat them. But we very quickly see that between the two, Darkwolf is the superior fighter. Teegra awakens at the bottom of the ravine with a large man standing over her. He is incredibly intimidating, but doesn't mean her any harm. With his bare hands, he rips the chains apart and picks her up. During this, the glacier continues to move closer to Firekeep, and the king eventually tells his son that he needs to go to Necron and negotiate a truce. His son is in complete disagreement, but his father forces him. At this point, I honestly forgot that these characters were in the film. We once again return to Teegra, who has been carried to the hut of a woman named Roleel, who was wearing the most revealing dress I have ever seen. While her words are comforting, there is something unsettling about her, and it seems that she has poisoned Teegra and put her to sleep. She grabs one of her hairs and throws it into a cauldron, and then discovers that she has been hunted by Necron. She then decides to hand Teegra over to Necron for a price. We cut back to Larn and Darkwolf, who are combating the dogs of Necron, as they are often referred to, or subhumans as well. Darkwolf then throws Larn to the side, forcing him to go find Teegra as he stands up to Necron's forces alone. More slow motion takes place before Darkwolf lets out a roar so loud the skies change colour. The same large creature that rescued Teegra has now found her pursuers. He soon meets his rather emotional end as he walks into Roleel's hut before collapsing on the ground with a spear in his back. In anger, Roleel screams at the dogs before being stabbed and thrown to the ground. A defenseless Teegra is then captured once again, slowly becoming a boring and repetitive cycle. And Roleel's hut begins to burn. Larn sees the fire in the distance and begins to run at it. And then we witness probably the creepiest scene in the movie, and one that I thought was so interesting I wish was given more time to develop. Larn arrives at the burned down hut finding nothing but ash, until Roleel arises from the ashes as a rotting skeleton with bones exposed. Flip, I loved this sequence. The animation and voice acting for Roleel is incredibly creepy and unsettling. I love it. Larn tries to explain that he wants to save Teegra from Necron to the corpse of Roleel. However, she blames Teegra for her death and so refuses to hand over any information she may have. This is an incredibly interesting concept to me. How do you beg for something from a dead person? What do you have to offer them? I just wish this movie spent more time on this scene. But ultimately, Larn convinces Roleel to tell him where he can find Teegra after guaranteeing Necron's death. And so, Roleel tells Larn to head towards Agatar before she crumbles to dust. Larn then races to Agatar, where he sees Teegra is captured with no means of escape. Larn then sees the prince from Firekeep and his ship is heading to Ice Peak, and he sneaks aboard. Once at Ice Peak, Juliana presents Teegra to Necron and offers her as a bride, to which Necron angrily refuses. Teegra then begs Necron to take her as his ally if it means bringing peace between their people. His response is to laugh at her and cast her aside. He has no desire for peace, only to rule. He hates the notion of sharing his throne so much that he threatens to end his mother's own life. Teegra is then thrown down into a pit full of dead bodies. The princess ship finally arrives as Larn jumps off and heads his own way. Here we see an incredibly interesting scene in which the prince and his soldiers march up to Ice Peak. I absolutely love how the subhumans bark and howl as the soldiers travel below them. Making them create these animalistic sounds hammers home the point that these aren't true humans and that they haven't truly evolved. They have an inherent fight within them to survive, and they lack the kinder and warmer emotions that make us truly human. The prince continues to move on bravely, however, unflinching in his resolve. His confidence and bravery is all for naught, however, because as soon as the prince attempts to form any kind of truce between the two kingdoms, Necron uses his dark magic to force the prince and his soldiers to kill themselves and each other. Necron's powers have never really been explained, and they seem to come out of nowhere. Necron has the prince's body thrown into the same pit as Teegra, and when she awakens, the first thing she sees is her dead brother's body. While Teegra mourns for her brother, Larn has found a way into the throne room and launches an arrow at the shoulder of Necron, who just brushes it off. Another power of his, I guess. Necron then unarms Larn using his powers and uses his guards to subdue him. Because of his mighty plot armor, Larn is not killed, but offered a fair fight. The two then begin an incredibly slow fight that is probably the least exciting in the entire movie. Their swords only meet 3 times before Larn lands a slice across Necron's torso, and Necron then uses his powers to cast Larn aside. Larn is then thrown around by Necron's force powers, yet another new power, and once again, because of plot armor, Larn is not killed, but instead just kept captive. After Teegra's mourning, she takes her brother's knife and attempts to make her own escape. She then hears Larn's groans as he struggles to fight his captors. She watches as he gets thrown into a cell before trying to communicate with him. She then rushes to find him a key so that they can escape together. And that is probably the most character development you'll get in this movie. Princess Teegra, a damsel in distress to a woman trying to save the protagonist. It might not be much, but it's something. She is very quickly captured, however, and at the same time, for plot convenience purposes, a guard opens Larn's cell to look for him. Larn then attacks the guard, and after several incredibly impactful punches, is able to escape. Being chased by minions, Larn continues to run, but soon a storm appears out of nowhere, and we hear Necron's laugh. Another one of his powers, I guess? Larn continues to run through the blizzard until it just stops for some reason, before collapsing on the ground exhausted. And it is at this point that I ask myself, why has no one frozen to death? Everyone, and I mean everyone, is half naked and surrounded by ice. But just as Larn is about to be killed, Darkwolf appears and sends 2 arrows into the chest of the closest dog. He then quickly dispatches the final 3 as Larn collapses. Somehow, without explanation, Larn is at Firekeep talking to the king. Yeah, remember how Larn had to sneak aboard a ship? We're just going to ignore that. So a final assault on Ice Peak is decided upon, and Darkwolf and Larn soar through the air, through the skies on Dragonhawks. This next sequence is quite an enjoyable one, and the sight of a swarm of Dragonhawks is quite impressive. But incredibly quickly, the Dragonhawks begin to perish as they are killed by subhumans. However, plot armor saves the day once again, and Darkwolf and Larn survive the assault as Necron sits on his throne room waiting. His laugh then causes the ceiling to collapse in an attempt to kill our heroic duo. Larn's Dragonhawk then unexplainably crashes, like for absolutely no reason, and Darkwolf heads for the throne room. His Dragonhawk is peppered by arrows, but he is able to successfully launch himself into the throne room, where he easily dispatches tens of minions. Necron is then seen laughing atop his fortress as the grounds begin to tremble. Larn then finds Teegra just sitting on the floor before being attacked by Juliana. Teegra fights free and throws a knife into a minion, saving Larn's life. Larn then pulls off some seriously sweet moves and actually kills 2 more subhumans. Teegra and Larn then embrace. The couple, who have only ever said a few words to one another, have finally been reunited. The final confrontation then takes place, and is between Darkwolf and Necron. It begins with Dark Wolf yelling Necron, completely giving away the element of surprise. And what ensues is an even more boring fight than before, as Necron continues to try to kill Dark Wolf using his powers. Until, for whatever reason, maybe Dark Wolf has powers we don't know about, he is able to break through Necron's magic and swings his axe into his ribs. Juliana sees this and lets out one of the least convincing screams you will ever hear, as Dark Wolf delivers the final blow. And there you have it. The least developed, however arguably coolest character kills the primary villain of the movie. It would be nice if we knew what his motivation was, but oh well. As Necron dies, the Fire King releases a flood of magma that sweeps through the glacier, destroying it and everyone inside. Juliana just falls to her death in a rather nothing death, having accomplished literally nothing in the movie. Remember when we thought she might be important since she was the very first character introduced in the movie? And Larn and Teegra are able to escape using the Dragonhawk that crashed for absolutely no reason. And now, it can fly for no reason. The glacier then falls apart and crumbles to nothing, as we see Larn and Teegra lying motionless on the ground. The two then awaken to see Dark Wolf sitting on his horse. I have no idea where he got it from. A subhuman then crawls out of the water behind our prehistoric couple as Larn turns around to pick up a rock. Teegra then stops Larn, telling him that if they want to start over, there mustn't be any killing. The two then begin walking away before sharing the world's first caveman kiss. That's just my personal headcanon. And the movie ends. And that is Fire and Ice. In conclusion, what can I actually say about this movie? It is a typical fantasy adventure film with next to no character development and a repetitive cycle of story beats. I can only watch a princess be captured and a caveman run away from danger so many times before it becomes stale. My biggest issue is the lack of explanation and thought put into the film, especially near the end. This happens far too often. How did Larn get back to the Fire Kingdom? Where did the Dragonhawk go? And why did it crash? What are Necron's powers? The list goes on. The film had a lot of potential, and if they had simply fleshed out the characters and their motivations, it would have made for a much more exciting and well-rounded product. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to watch my content. If you haven't yet, then please subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.